In this video, the Historic Ordnance series, we're going to look at the Italian TC6 low metallic anti-tank mine. Now, this mine was one of those primary ones that the CIA loved to send around the world. They sent in huge quantities of these into Afghanistan. And the CIA actually got a contract from the manufacturer in Italy to have these produced in Pakistan and secretly shipped across the border. And there is a story on that I will get into. Now, this mine has been found in or is in service with Afghanistan, Chad, Ecuador, Egypt, Tajikistan, Israel, Lebanon, Portugal. Hamas employs large amounts of these. Sudan, Iraq. Reportedly, a bunch of them have been captured in Ukraine now. This mine is licensed to be manufactured in Egypt and Portugal. It is no longer being manufactured in Italy. The company went out of business in the late 1990s because of lawsuits. Now, some of the technicals on this is 10 3/4 inches in diameter, 7 inches in height. Weight is 21 pounds, of which 13 1/4 pounds was the explosive filler. The explosive filler is Comp B. There is a booster which is located down at the bottom of the fuse well, and I do not have information as to what the booster is. The mine is made out of plastic. It comes in green or sand color. Temp range for the mine is -24 to a max of 158 degrees Fahrenheit. This is because it's using Comp B, not TNT. Now, the pressure fuse on this, I could not find anything that gave me the actual designation for this fuse. According to the French, it is basically a VSN pressure fuse. Russian sappers say it is an SH-160. Both of those fuses are made by the same company, which happens to be the company that used to manufacture these mines. So it could be either one. And when I've looked at Italian mines, both those fuses, the VSN and the SH-160, are interchangeable between the different types of mines as long as the thread patterns will line up. But there's no difference really between the two of them. This fuse is blast resistant because of the way it operates. Now, the fuse on this is pneumatic. You have a couple little air sacs inside here. And in order to get the fuse to operate, you need a continuous pressure on the pressure plate here to press the air out to bring the striker in line with the detonator to set it off, so it'll set off the booster charge. When the MIC goes off over the top of this, a mine clearing line charge, it's not continuous pressure. It's just that one fast hit, and that hit is not powerful enough to set this fuse off. Now, pressure required to set off this fuse reportedly is between 396 pounds to 683 pounds. Now, some information on this which is kind of interesting. The Soviets, when they came across these, they came across them in large numbers. These mines were extremely popular with the Russian sappers. This was one of those items they wanted to bring home with them as a war trophy, and they could because there was so many of them on the battlefield. When they would capture some of these or recover them from roads, because the Mooj used to put them in roads to take out supply trucks, they would open them up down here, unscrew the two halves, clear out all the explosive, wash it out. Well, the bottom shell is now empty. Perfectly, completely demilled at that point. The fuse, they'd go through, just remove the stuff in here so that no detonator could ever be installed. And there you go. Now, the Russian sappers noticed that there was a difference on these mines. Some of the mines would go off as soon as one vehicle would go over them. Some of them, though, would go off with the 9th vehicle, 10th vehicle, the 100th vehicle to travel over the top. So the Soviet sappers were wondering, was there a model that had something with it internally in the fuse to basically be a pressure cumulative type situation where it had to be driven over a certain number of times before it went off. Now, Soviet technical intel, they requested that the mines be sent to them back in the Soviet Union. And dozens of them were sent back, and they would test all of them and try to figure out what's going on. They did not see any difference in any of the fuses. They would go through, inspect them, see if there's anything special with the fuse, put it back together, and then test the mine, see if it would go off. Some of them would go off with the first time that it was driven over. Others would not go over until it had the weight applied to it multiple times. And they could not figure out what was going on because they said the internals of the fuse were the exact same. There was nothing special. But they kept watching, and they started looking at the fuse more closely. And what they noticed is that there was defects in the mine fuse body up here, where the vents that allowed the air to escape once the pressure was applied on the pressure plate, some of those vents had not been drilled out, or they weren't completely drilled out. There was, partial bits of plastic going all the way across. It looked like there was no proper quality control going on at the factory. So they were wondering, was this going on at the factory back in Italy, or what was happening? So they contacted the KGB. KGB does their thing along with Soviet military intelligence. They start doing checking around, and that's when they found out the CIA had contracted a company in Pakistan to produce these mines so they were closer to the battlefield. And that company in Pakistan was not doing any quality control. So those mines that were not going off when they were being driven over would go off so many vehicles later. Those were ones that came from that factory in Pakistan with zero quality control. They were not made correctly. The ones that were made correctly, they came from the factory in Italy. Now, there are no secondary fuse wells on this, but depending on where you look, some sources say there is a secondary fuse well on the bottom. I'd say it probably depends on who manufactured it. Some of the ones that you can find pictures of online that were captured by Soviet sappers, there is no fuse well. In this drawing down here, it does show that there's a fuse well though. However, it shows there's a filler cap, but there's no fuse well. So who knows for certain? It could be a thing where the Italians produced it one way and then Pakistan did it another. There's also a conflict of information where the Soviet sappers said the filler wasn't Comp B, it was TNT. I got a feeling that also is one of those ones that was produced in Pakistan. They may not have been able to get a hold of Comp B, so they were using what they could get a hold of, which was TNT. There is a version of this mine that does have an internal anti-handling device, the TCE-6. Now, the TCE-6 has an electrically armed fuse that looks the exact same as this from the outside. The only way you're going to be able to tell the difference is before it's put on the mine. That's the only way you're able to see that this does not look the same here. The TCE-6 apparently is supposed to be armed using a remote control. And that fuse does have magnetic and seismic capabilities, so that fuse does act as an anti-handling device. The TC6 mine that you see here does have a smaller younger brother. This one right here, the TC 3.6. It's the exact same mine, except it has about half the amount of explosives. Both these mines did make appearances in Afghanistan. Now, installation on these mines, it'll be the same for both, and I'm not going to give it for the TCE, just the straight TC model. First thing you're going to do, you're going to inspect the mine, inspect the fuse, and inspect the detonator. Make sure everything is operational, no damage that would cause interference. The fuse is shipped separate from the mine. Reportedly, the mine does have this pressure plate retaining ring is attached to it, and then underneath it they have a transport cap. So after you're done with the inspection, that is when you're going to remove that little plate there, that transport cap, and you're going to replace it with the actual fuse, which is probably inside the same crate. Do not put the detonator in yet. The detonator is like on the VSN fuse. Reportedly, there is a dummy that is inside the well here during transportation. But everything passes. You replace that transport cap with the actual fuse, screw it back on with the pressure plate retaining ring. Then take the mine and the detonator to the location where it's going to be emplaced. This mine is not meant for surface lay, it is meant for burying. It is too tall for putting out on surface lay. Could you do it in an emergency? Yes, but it is intended to be buried. So when you dig a hole, it goes up to the ring right here. Pressure plate will be a little bit above it. There is notes though that you can put a max of 3 to 6 inches of soil over the top of the pressure plate. It can be emplaced in snow, and the max amount of loose snow that can be over the top of the pressure plate is 1 meter. Not packed, loose. So we have our hole prepped. We then put the mine in a hole, unscrew the pressure plate retaining ring. We're then going to remove the detonator retaining collar. We're going to remove the dummy detonator from inside the channel in here, or the tube. Chuck that. Actually put it in your pocket. You dispose of it once you're away from the area. You're going to insert the live detonator into the fuse well here. Screw the detonator retaining collar back onto the bottom of the fuse, and then place it on top of the mine and screw down the pressure plate retaining ring. The mine is now armed. You go through, camouflage. Now removal. If these are mines that you put in, they have been under continuous overwatch, and you know that there are no TCE6s in that minefield, you can remove the mines. If you come across these mines in a demining situation, do not attempt removal, destroy in place, because there is no outward difference between the TC6 and the TCE6. There's also no difference between the TC 3.6 and the TCE 3.6. They look the exact same, so you do not know if that particular mine has that internal anti-handling device. So you come across this, you're clearing a roadway, you're doing demining, destroy in place. Plain and simple, that's all you can do. Now, if you did emplace these were being used by your military, you know there are no mines in there with the anti-handling device fuse on it. You're going to go through, check around the mine, make sure there's no protective mines or booby traps that have been emplaced. Once that's clear, you're going to attempt to locate this mine, which is extremely hard because this mine is really a non-metallic. There's very, very little metallic content in here. Damn near none. But locate the mine. Once you locate the mine, you're going to uncover it, and then you're going to check the sides and underneath to make sure no one attached an anti-handling device or a booby trap. If none have been located, you are then going to remove the pressure plate retaining ring with the fuse. Turn the fuse onto the side here. You're going to remove the detonator retaining collar. Remove the detonator. Pull the live one out of the little well. You're then going to return the detonator retaining collar with its holder here for the detonator back to the fuse. You're going to place that fuse back on top of the mine. Screw down the detonator, the pressure plate retaining collar or ring. Take the detonator with you. Remove the mine from the hole using a grapple hook and rope. Mine doesn't explode. Go up there, recover the mine, turn in the mine, the fuse on it, and the detonator to the mine dump for either disposal or possible reuse. So, these mines are only being produced now in Egypt and Portugal, and the designations for them in both countries is still TC6. And reportedly, there is no difference in appearance between the Italian ones and the ones made in Egypt and the ones made in Portugal. There is a kind of a debate I found online where the ones recovered from Hamas, the thoughts are those are probably ones that were made in Egypt, not the actual Italian ones, because apparently the Italians supposedly didn't make that many of them. And no one knows exactly how many were produced by Portugal or by Egypt. And God only knows how many clones were made in that factory in Pakistan since they started cranking out production TC6s in the early 1980s. For all we know, they're still cranking them out and still funneling them through the Middle East. Who knows? Because this mine has made an appearance in Afghanistan or in Ukraine, it's a sure bet a bunch of these have ended up on the international arms black market. So this is a mine that will be out there. The chances of ever coming across it is pretty high. So, and I will say this as a caveat, I could not 100% confirm the installation instructions on the fuse. It could be different than what I gave you. I gave you the instructions for the VSN fuse that is on the SH55, which is supposed to be the same, but there is a possibility that this detonator down here is a single unit and it comes separately, that this blue one here that you see, that could be just the transport one. And then when you put it in live, they have a different colored one that's in the crate that you just screw right on, that's already ready to go with no dummy inside. I'm not 100% certain on that. I was getting conflicting information back and forth, looking all over the place, trying to confirm one or the other. So there you go, the Italian TC6 low metallic anti-tank mine. Now, for all my engineer brothers in the Patriot Militia movements, always remember, essayons.